Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Khofane. I'm Khofane Modise, and today I'm joined by a very beautiful, I want to call you an artist, but you're more than that. I think you're a student, you're a teacher, you are art itself. Yeah, because you're stunning. You're very, yeah, I told you that I went through a lot of your YouTube videos, courtesy of my good friend Melissa. And virtue of seeing you as well and just kind of going through your life, you are very multi-dimensional. So hi, Nandipha.
Hi.
How are you?
Wow.
Just take us through who you are as an individual and how you really, I think you've really progressed, not just progressed, but evolved in the way you define yourself based on how I've seen your media features.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you firstly for having me, and nice to meet you. Well, I mean, it's how I would define myself. I guess as a visual person, I started as a fine artist. I have my master's from UCT. And kind of focused in on sculpture at the time. But I guess because of the fact that I get bored very quickly, I started exploring different modes of making things. So working in photography and performance and video.
I think there was a point you did something with cybersecurity or like, I don't know, technology, something.
Well, I was going to be a forensic pathologist,
Really?
actually.
Pathologist,
Initially.
yeah.
So anyway, before the art, I was going to be a forensic pathologist.
Okay.
But then, the interesting thing is that the pathology and I think science and the way that organic material can be used alongside chemical process then came into my art practice because within my sculptural work, how I began working was with cowhide actually.
Yeah.
And I worked with a taxidermist at the time who helped me understand how to tan cowhide. So that's the main kind of medium that I am known for. But then I guess right now, I mean, I make functional sculptures that live in people's houses as part of their furniture. I teach as well. I'm forever learning as well. So, I mean, I think a lot is happening.
Yeah. Had you always kind of seen your life kind of take this direction?
No. I mean, I'm not a person who overly projects in terms of what I imagine things are going to be like in a year or 2 years. So no, I had no idea.
Yeah, and then also not being constantly bored, I guess, because I mean, I don't know. I think is that one of the traits that make you the artist that you are?
I think it's probably a combination because you can be constantly bored and do nothing about it, I think that being a person who's bored, but also with the ambition and the drive and the interest to try new things and to challenge oneself, makes you a different kind of animal.
Yeah. And speaking of animals, which is something that you speak a lot about, I think beastly nature of human beings and animals themselves and how we coincide. What would you say had sparked that thought to investigate that modality?
Well, initially, like I said, I was interested in forensics. I was very good at science and maths and biology growing up. And so I think the space of life and death was probably the thing that kind of sparked my interest in the material that I ended up working in, because I think the thing is it's the one thing that we're all guaranteed. We're all guaranteed birth and we're all guaranteed death. It's a universal theme or a universal connector that every living organism on this planet has in common. And then when I started doing my art degree, I was having this very deep struggle with material and what material to use because I was interested in sculpture. And at the time, because of how the lecturers, or even because of the history of art that we understood in terms of African art history, what we understood at that time was a very limited understanding of what materiality or what materials could be that one could create an art piece with. And so there was a deep push to kind of make me work in stone or in metal or in wood.
The usual.
And for me, those materials didn't resonate, you know.
Wow.
So I had this very long struggle with, you know, what to do. And then had this dream that all I remember of it is that I was left with a whole lot of skins of cows. So, so I called my father the next day, shame, when he was still alive. I called him and I was like, Dad, I need to find some cowhide, you know, and he was just like, what? And so this poor man had to drive me all around Cape Town because I lived in Cape Town at the time. And we found an abattoir that was willing to give me some cowhides. I had no idea what I was going to do with them. I was just like, I've got to have this thing, you know. And then took them to my studio at Michaela's. That's the UCT art school. And had no idea what I was going to do with them. Didn't know how to dry them, didn't understand that you needed to put salt, didn't understand that there would be maggots, didn't understand how to deal with the smell, it was just chaos.
Yeah.
So luckily, the campus is right next door to the Natural History Museum. And when I walked in there and explained to them my dilemma, I was allocated a taxidermist who then helped me with understanding how to tan this material. So I think for me, the interesting part of how the story evolved is that within art history at that time, we were looking at mythology, and specifically Greek mythology at that time for me was the one that was, I guess, in the forefront, in that the Greeks had a very clear relationship and recorded living alongside or even being interchangeable with animals, you know. So how the Minotaur was formed, how a centaur, for instance, existed. And the fact that animals and humans have this relationship where they can either exchange bodies or become part of one body, but they can never live separately from each other. And then looking at different mythologies, whether it be Hindi or the Chinese or different African mythologies, and the fact that there is this very clear and close relationship between animals and humans. And so, yeah, I suppose it made sense.
It makes sense then.
Yeah.
I'm very intrigued by the material that you chose and still kind of run with it to date. Do you feel like you were called to it, or do you think there was some sort of cultural backing that maybe subconsciously had led to you choosing cowhide?
Well, it's a weird, I mean, I don't really know how to answer that right now because I didn't grow up on a farm, for instance. We didn't grow up around cows. My parents, I mean, my father was a Methodist priest who then became a bishop. So in terms of a cultural, an African cultural background around the animal itself, I didn't have that kind of relationship. And I mean, yes, we have a family farm, but we didn't really spend much time there. So I don't really know, other than this dream that I was telling you about, what the deep connection was.
Yeah. Do you find that your dreams resonate deeply or guide what art form you're going to create?
No, actually, funny enough.
Okay.
Because since that was the only dream that I remember that then sparked this thing. But then when I started working with the material, it was a more awake, intuitive process, if that makes any sense. So I would just make something on the spot. So I wouldn't be dreaming of it or anything like that.
Yeah. And then how did you find the reception towards your exploration of Greek mythology and the correlation of human beings and animals from, I guess, the civilized world? Was it more accepted in European countries or in African countries, or was it just a mixture?
Well, when I first started working, it wasn't accepted anywhere, really. So, European people had the perception that I was specifically kind of making reference to the space of lobola and how
Oh, wow.
the exchange of
Yeah.
women, because I'm a woman, there's no way that I could be thinking
Surely
beyond
not.
the space of being exchanged for cows at some point in my life.
Yeah.
And so therefore, the work definitely had to do with
Oh,
lobola. Other people, because of the fact that there was a time when I was working exclusively in black hide, had the perception that I was making reference to myself and other African people as baboons or as monkeys.
wow.
African people, African people, yes, African people, I think at the time, because of the fact that there wasn't a deep understanding of how certain objects can be used beyond a cultural reference. It was just like, okay, Winsang, and you're a coconut on top of it. Like what are you doing?
What are you doing?
And so I think it was a struggle because right now, we're in a different moment where cultural objects or what is perceived to be a cultural object or a cultural material is understood in a different way. Back then, it was quite complex.
And then now, so you weren't able to tell your own narrative, or people weren't listening?
The thing is that people were very quick to stereotype and box what the narrative should be. So, because of their limited understanding of material, there was the perception that it was about this particular thing. But when I came back and said, no, but actually it's about chemical process and the fact that I'm able to manipulate an organic object, that's what we are dealing with here. And working in black versus working in white is about a color palette rather than making reference to anything.
Yeah.
So, the interesting part about, being an undergrad and then completing my master's was being able to find that language around, yes, as a viewer, you are allowed to have your own perception and your own idea around what something could be about. But if the person who's making it can't kind of come with a clear explanation or a clear couple of sentences around what they actually are intending for you to see, then we have a problem, And so I think that the problem or the issue was that a lot of people, because of their own limitations, had a very stereotypical, closed way of looking at work and looking at material. And so making it my job or making it my interest to further my own studies, read a little bit more, figure out what other artists are doing, kind of help me, navigate that space.
Yeah. I will also say that I find your work challenging.
Yeah.
In terms of my personal dialogue with it and understanding that it has to go beyond my limited understanding of how the world works and how I see things. Because I think we mentioned the Design Endeavor interview of presentation that you did, which was my favorite amongst the many, and in which you explore, I guess, bestiality, I guess, of sorts, and the things that we don't like ourselves as human beings, or things that we are shunned upon. There's a structure that you had designed of a hairy person. It was just hairy. And the way you always said it when you started off, you said it was just a joke. It wasn't that deep. But yet it made me have this internal dialogue with myself to say, okay, what is it that I don't like about myself, or why don't I like those things about myself? Is it society, or is it generally me? Was that always the intention, or have you just not really taken things so seriously that you say, well, I mean, it's life, live it?
Well, no, I mean, I take many things very seriously, I think. And I think that the fact that the work has the success of being able to make you feel uncomfortable, of being able to make you think about something is exactly the point, When I was mentioning the joke, it was, I mean, I went to girls' schools growing up, and all of these girls were shaving because I was like one of the very few blacks at the time. And so the space of not having body hair and how we connect hair to beauty, to I mean, as black women, of course, maybe our leg hair or armpit hair isn't that important, but the head of hair that you have on your head and how that is attached to your understanding of how beautiful or attractive or whatever it is that you are. Um, hair is this kind of weird central conversation that men and women have
Yeah.
with each other. Um, and at the same time, it's quite an animalistic element of life.
Yeah.
And so this um, very kind of contentious space of, how much is too much, how much is too little, how, like, how does it function? What makes you more, beastly? What makes you less beastly? How do you even negotiate that?
Hey, who sets these standards?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that the sort of joke, that was something that I was trying to kind of grapple with for myself became a larger conversation in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I asked myself this question, which was, are we really, as human beings, not so far from beasts? Are we not just beasts that are able to articulate and hide our true nature? And that's how I really shunned away from your pieces because they carried such a strong aura of certainty and power that kind of takes it. I'm so sorry to do this, but I gotta quote Mandela. Yeah.
Sorry. Let me listen to the quote.
Like that thing, a quote. There was in a quote that's behind like sugar packets.
Hey, I don't take sugar, so I don't know. What quote is it?
And that our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that, we are more than what we could be.
Okay.
And that's how I felt about the art, that I could be more than this. And I think it was this woman king inspired, and you'll correct me, structures where these women were quite strong and a bit masculine, somewhat androgynous in a way.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is terrifying, but I'm so drawn to it. I don't know, why would you do that? Where are the hips? In a BBL world, what's going on? Hey, so can you maybe tell us about that? Why you don't shy away from a somewhat demigod structural expression of a woman?
Well, I mean, I think it probably comes back to the space of when I first started working. I was always interested in uncovering or discovering or picking apart how we understand animal versus human, for instance. How do we think about male versus female? How do you tell the difference? Is it that I present as a female to you, and so you're somehow comfortable with it, but on like a chromosome level, I may not at all be a female? How do we make these very clear distinctions or decisions around things? How do you know whether you're repulsed by something or whether you're attracted by it? Because you could be feeling exactly the same thing at the same time. You could be drawn to it and also totally repulsed. And how do you know which side of this line you're actually on? How do you know whether you are protecting yourself versus fighting against something? Can you always tell the difference, And so also I think that the kind of in-between space of not knowing whether you're on that side or the other side of the line is what I've always been fascinated with. And so androgyny was always a very clear interest, I guess, of mine. And when I was a lot younger, I looked very masculine, just because of, I don't know, being a tomboy, how people, I think, evolve in terms of their look, their feel.
Yeah.
And so that space of androgyny was always quite interesting to me. And so, whether it was about performing or pretending to be a bullfighter, for instance, the bullfighters that we've seen have generally been male. And so having to take on that persona of that very masculine energy in order to make the video something that was believable is an important part of performance, for instance. And because I'm interested in in making things as believable, stretching your thought process, challenging you. You know, it's important for me yeah, I mean, to investigate things as deeply as I can. So within the series that you're talking about the Benin ladies, it actually came before the Woman King, which is the funny part. In Cape Town, I had a friend who had given me a book that was about the Amazons of Dahomey. That's the title of this book. And I had it for over like 12 years. And I was putting it down, picking it up, not quite getting to the end of reading this book. And then I moved back to Johannesburg during that time. And then there was COVID, and COVID kind of gave me time to read this book and understand what it was that it was about. And this book was about these women who were the personal bodyguard of the kings of Dahomey. And so right now, Dahomey is Benin Republic, as we understand it. And whether it be your Black Panther or Wakanda people and also the Woman King, their reference was actually about these women who started off as being the personal bodyguards to the kings of Dahomey. And so I was lucky enough to actually go to Benin Republic. We were given access, I was given access to the palace where these women lived and trained. And so the space of performing, being a warrior, being a masculine presenting person, being somebody who's got the potential to kill, but at the same time, these women were so interesting to me because they were killers, but at the same time, because they were women, they had the potential to have a kind of dual personality. So they would go into the neighboring village pretending to be like helpless women and then turn around and kill these
Slit their
people, you
throats.
know. And so that interesting duality of being able to be vulnerable, but also very scary or very able to protect oneself is an interesting thing to me. And so when I was making that work, it was about that space of duality. You know, what do soldiers do? How do they look? What is their facial expression? And so in order for it to be as believable as possible, you have to kind of leave yourself at the door and become somebody else, you know.
And in what way were you impacted, or was it just, it's a job and I'm going to fulfill
No, I think for me, it's never really a job, because if it was a job, then I would be very concerned with who would buy it. I would be I would be more strategic in terms of how I would want things to look. And for me, it's never really been a job, you know. So
Yeah. And in your experience, did you uncover a different layer of yourself while studying these women, or did you find yourself a bit more vulnerable, or did you draw more strength? I'm very curious about in the process of you having had read the literature and developing these structures.
Well, I think probably both, because the thing is, you know, when you are outside of your comfort zone, I mean, Benin Republic is not an easy space. Besides the fact that, you know, as a person who doesn't speak French, there's limitations around how you understand what's happening around you. As a person who was, because, you know, they're quite a masculine society. So for a woman to come in and be the one who's making the shots, paying for things, telling people what to do, is not something that they're used to. So I think that challenged me a little bit. And also, you know, there's something that we don't speak about enough in terms of the energy of places and how the energy of Johannesburg, for instance, is totally different to the energy of Cape Town, and how that impacts you, your work, how you deal with things. In Benin Republic, they have a very deep-rooted space that is surrounded or around the religion of voodoo, and how they deal with themselves as individuals, how they perceive what you and your energy brings as a visitor. It's pretty intense.
I need us to go through that. What happened?
And so it was quite a challenge. It was pretty intense.
Yeah. Did you find yourself grappling between your personal beliefs and what the energy of that space brought? Was there often this conflict that you went through?
Well, yes and no, because like I said to you, once you go into a space, at least for me, in order for me to be as authentic as I can be within my performance or my portrayal of certain things, I have to leave my perceptions and my feelings at the door, to be honest with you. So whether I'm in Portugal, whether I'm in Mozambique, if I've chosen a particular subject, in order for me to believe that I'm being as authentic as I can, I leave my thoughts and my perceptions at the door. And so, not to say that, you participate in everything that is involved within a particular religion or whatever. But for instance, I believe that if we hadn't, because part of our trip was that we went to one of the biggest slave ports in Africa, actually. And the energy of dealing with that and not acknowledging that is something that you just cannot do. Then for me, there was a masquerade that was done for us, but it was about a very specific character that is a very heavy character in terms of how they understand this God or this protector in voodoo religion. And I believe that if I had not paid my respects in the way that they prescribe, I mean, we went to the temple of the pythons to give thank you to the pythons, some money, goodbye, Ratama. So, and so not at all that I'm a person who would want pythons in my house or even understands what the hell is going on, but the paying of a respect around something, I think, saved my life, because I came back, I got really sick, I lost a kidney, it was crazy. So I think that if I had not paid that small respect, then I might not be alive today. So
it's terrifying.
Sure. I don't know. And nobody can prove that.
That's the thing.
That's just my feeling.
Right. So do you think as an artist, especially when you go into spaces that are strong or profusely cultural, or there's a certain strong belief, you like you said, you leave those beliefs at the door, that your personal beliefs at the door, so that, because I don't know how you can try to disprove what a whole country believes.
Yeah.
But yet, how do you remain authentic?
Well, I mean, like I'm saying, it's taken me many years, but the decision to, I could never, for instance, there are situations where I know I'm not a dancer, right? I know I'm not a photographer. There's no way that I will ever take my own photographs. There's no way that I will ever be in a performance video that I create where I'm dancing. I'm clear about that.
Right.
But in order for me to take on the personality or the persona of a bullfighter, I need to understand what it's about. I need to live with the bullfighter. I need to go to the bullfights.
And you were in Spain at that time when you did that?
No, in Portugal, because the bullfighting arena that I focused on is in Mozambique, and the Portuguese are the ones who colonized Mozambique, and so there's a different style of bullfighting that the Spanish versus the Portuguese do.
Sure.
So there are certain aspects where I'm very clear around the fact that, okay, I'm not a dancer, so I need to get somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
But I spend a lot of time with the dancers. I spend a lot of time with the person who's composing the music. I spend a lot of time immersing myself in that way, so that when I look at what the dancers are doing, if it doesn't resonate with me, I'm able to say, sorry, can we try something else? Or This just doesn't. So I think my point is that, for me personally, being able to immerse myself in a particular project or in a particular culture helps me to be as authentic as I can be. Because I can never live the life of a dancer. I can never live the life of a bullfighter. I can never live in Benin Republic. But if I don't spend a bit of time researching, being on the ground, understanding what a portion of what it's about, then I think the artwork would fail.
And I'm really fighting the temptation to ask, why bullfighting? But because why? Why was that a thing?
I mean, at the time, it was actually another funny joke,
Okay.
like another funny situation. Because I'm originally from Swaziland, and Mozambique is next door, and we had family friends who lived in Mozambique, so we were on a holiday, and there was this new shopping center that they were building, and we were like, hey, let's go shopping. And across the road from this shopping center was this building. And I fell in love with, I'm an architecture. So anyway, so fell in love with this building, not understanding what the hell it was that I was looking at, because underneath, this very huge space, there's like a makeshift taxi rank, taxi repair, and this was back then. And so, I was just like, okay, I need to understand what this building is, what is happening. And it turned out it was a bullfighting arena. And so I came back to South Africa, and I think, the space of the mythology that I was already kind of thinking around. How do you understand animal versus human? How do you understand when you're fighting versus when you're protecting yourself? What is it that happens between animals and humans when we're in the space of a fight or a bullfight, for instance? Because the reality is, the fighter, yes, you train to understand how to move your body, how to stab the bull, how to, but at the same time, the bull is also treated so well before the time they go into the bullfighting arena. So they're bred in a very specific way, they're fed in a very specific way, but then at the same time, they have these practices where they are basically trained to be in the ring. So when they're both in the ring, there's this moment where they're both protecting themselves and both fighting at exactly the same time. So that complex space of the experience of exactly the same feelings, I think, is what I was really interested in. Yeah. So I went on this huge investigation of bullfighting and went to Portugal. So I think that interesting thing of, are you protecting yourself or are you fighting?
All as a form of performance, and that's the thing,
yes.
to entertain.
So that very complex space is what I was really interested in.
Sorry, I just got goosebumps. I forgot we're doing a podcast here. All right, next question. And did you find any what does it say, like a cause or limitations for being female, for being black?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, because I found a family in Portugal who the father was a bullfighter himself previously, and then he was at that time training his son as a bullfighter. But then the family was into bull breeding as well, and they had a hotel. So I went in to stay at the hotel, but stayed there for like 2 months. And then the sister, the older sister, was the hotel manager, and this boy was his, he was doing his bullfighting thing. And the father couldn't speak any English, and I obviously don't speak Portuguese, but we were kind of relying on his older daughter as the translator.
Yeah.
And this boy and I were the same age. He did not speak to me once while I was there. And eventually, I got them to allow me to go to a couple of bullfights. I was able to record this boy while he was doing his practice. I recorded his bullfight. And then eventually the father was like, okay, like, what do you want? Why are you here? Like, what is going on?
Acknowledging your presence.
What is going No, the father was always very sweet, but we could never communicate,
Oh,
So they
yeah.
let me hang out with the farm hands. I saw how they were dealing with the
Yeah.
bulls. And I think the father eventually was like, okay, but you're supposed to be a hotel guest. Like, why are you interested in all of this? And why are you here for so
So
long?
long.
Like, what is, and so I explained to the daughter that I wanted him to train me. I wanted to be a bullfighter. And he was just like, look, babes, firstly, you're a woman, you're black. No, like, he didn't even say you're black. He was just like, you're a woman. It's not. And it was so interesting to me that his first sort of reasoning was I was a woman. And
Yeah.
so, no, he didn't think, oh, no, but you're from Africa, or maybe he thought it, but he didn't mention it. And so that space of how we understand the role of male and female was the thing that then kind of, I suppose, stuck with me, and the
Mm.
fact that this person who I guess was stuck in his own tradition, his own thought around things, was very clear around why he would not do something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You've gone through so many experiences, and I wonder, I think you mentioned earlier that you've been in this space for 2 decades now. Do you think that the fact that you had to really go into the spaces, travel those countries, read the literature and so on, compared to now where I guess the modern artists, and I'll just call it that, and I hope I'm not bashing anyone, the young upsurging artists don't need to travel all that far. They could just go on YouTube and look up a video of you talking about it. And we're done. Okay, it's close. But do you think that kind of it doesn't allow them to immerse themselves in what could be their potential as well as artists?
well, I mean, I think it's a complicated thing to answer.
That'll slap on your knee.
It's a complicated thing to answer because not everybody is interested in immersion. Not everybody is interested in understanding the depths of something. Some people are happy with a very surface explanation or experience of whatever it is that they are engaging with at that time, because we live in a totally different moment where the faster something happens, the better. Like I said to you, I was in Portugal for 2 months. Then I came back and I had to find a choreographer who was willing to help me. Then we had to negotiate using the space. And so like 6 months went by. Whereas now, I think that instant gratification, or the instant way that things can more kind of quickly or more easily happen, allows some people to not need to immerse themselves. So I think it just depends on a personal preference.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not my preference, but
yeah. Do you think the same counts for the consumer of the art?
Well, I think the problem that we're facing is that we don't have any more deep and serious art historians, especially within South Africa. We don't have any art critics that I think are particularly noteworthy. And so the space of understanding art, the space of investigating certain things, the space of writing about art has shifted.
Yeah.
And so people now, probably because of a combination of a lack and also possibly the same instant gratification, they don't feel they need to necessarily know or figure it out. I mean, like even the Woman King story, I was making the work long before. They were shooting, I think, in Cape Town when my show happened.
Cape Town, I think also.
Oh.
Yeah.
And the immediate assumption was that I was like, no, I had no idea that this person was interested in this, and so and so how social media works, how we understand stories, how Hollywood, how the internet, I think can also shift people's education around things, gives a different perception around whether you need to have a deep understanding of something or not.
Yeah. And do you find yourself engaging, especially with your LA in LA, you exhibit your art there as well. Do you find yourself feeling the need to bridge the gap of understanding or allow people to just have a dialogue? Or is there some sort of frustration where people are not really understanding what it is that you're trying to achieve through your art?
Well, I mean, I think it would.
You know, it kills me. It's how high pitched your voice gets.
It's a complex, but also very, I think that the whole point is that for me, once a work is out there,
Yeah.
I have to understand the fact that there's going to be an individual perspective or thought on what the work is about. And on one hand, that is the point. On the other hand, like I was saying to you, if I wasn't able to maybe, I don't know, have interviews like we're having now, or, have, whether it be the Design Indaba, program that you watched, and not be able to be articulate around what it is in general the work is about. Whatever your perception is can not be shifted. You know what I mean? So you can have your own perspective, but then if you find it in yourself to dig a little bit deeper, do a little bit of research, you might understand that your perspective is not necessarily the right one because of what I've been saying over the years.
Right.
So it's a kind of a catch-22 where you have to let go of certain things. But then at the same time, it's the responsibility of the gallery that you show with, either to have like a little short excerpt on the work and what it's about. And it's also about you and being able to articulate what your intention is, So it's a combination. I don't think one lives without the other.
Right. And in the current state of life that you're at now, do you still wonder what's next, or you allow yourself to be in the present?
The present of what? No, I'm kidding. I mean, it's such a difficult thing to answer because, when I was 20, I didn't have a child, for instance. I didn't have the responsibilities that I have. And so being in the present meant a completely different thing to what it does now. Now, I suppose, having some kind of a projection around a short-term future. And so therefore the question of what's next, I think is a bit more, it's a bit more present or a little bit more prevalent. But I mean, I can't tell you, or I can't say that I'm out here thinking about 20 years from now or 5 years from now. No. That's not my way.
Yeah. I'm very grateful to have had this dialogue with you. Because I think I'm fascinated also by how you're able to really articulate your thought processes. You're able to justify why particular material, how you came about it. And I think that's one of the most fascinating things that I find about artists, I guess, in South Africa, which is not something that's not particularly common to me.
Yes.
Just the thought of studying art, like, are you not going to starve? Why would you do that? And so get that one big commission. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. But I just don't know how, like you mentioned earlier, that if you were a bit more strategic, then maybe you would be commercial enough, I guess. But then you wouldn't have had the success that you have now at the same time. So I think I just appreciate just who you are and how the level of certainty that you have in yourself. It's just so fascinating. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're hilarious. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And I am curious, what would you say has been your greatest lesson so far? And what advice would you give to us who are just simply bystanders and just enjoying and also somewhat terrified by art sometimes?
Well, sure. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there is no kind of one size fits all sort of advice or thought. I think for me, the main thing is that, we are living in a different moment, like I was saying earlier, where the very kind of fast way of dealing with things, fast way of getting information, I think works for a certain period of time. But at the same time, the space of the archive, the understanding of history, and the fact that it repeats itself is the thing that I think for me has been very, very fascinating.
Yeah.
I've had moments where I've been very frustrated with the fact that, there is an easier, quicker way of getting information sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, I think we were talking earlier about the fact that, when I was in my 19, 20 year kind of space, you would have to go to the library and get a book, or be on one of those big computers with the big screen, and you're there in the library typing away in order for you to get a particular piece of information. Whereas right now we have our cell phones. We have very sleek and sexy, gadgets that we can very easily take around and have instant access to things. And so the space of research that would take you maybe a week or two now happens literally in a second, and so even when a person is thinking around their own artistic voice or what it is they would like to use as a medium, or even a color palette around what they are interested in colors, they might have been influenced by something that they saw on their iPad 20 minutes ago. And that gets stored in their kind of subconscious mind, and then all of a sudden impacts how they're making an artwork 2 hours later. But because there's such an influx of information that this person has experienced, they don't realize that the photograph that they're taking actually is a reference to something that they saw an hour ago, and so in a weird way, I think artists right now are in a complex space, because the question of finding your own artistic voice is very complicated, because there's so many things that you're seeing on an everyday basis that influence how you think, that influence what it is you're thinking about, that influence how you think about color, how you think about form, how you think about shape. And so, in as much as there are a few people that I think have been able to slide through that, it's going to be a very momentary sliding through, in my opinion. And so I think being able to understand that things, trends, history repeat, and I think that yes, there's something very good and very helpful around an easy access to information, but at the same time, it might create a very complex situation.
Is there any positive note we can end with?
I'm so sorry.
It's got depressing really quick.
Well, I mean, I think even within that,
We got our not so live audience laughing now. So.
But I think that the whole point that is, even within the space of this very easily accessible thing, if you are able to find your way beyond something that's easily accessible, find your way beyond just looking at the internet. You can have a very real experience either in nature or the things around you that then shift what you've just seen on this gadget in a way that maybe could make it more interesting for you as a person. So I think the combination of real life experiences and then these automated online experiences probably would be great. Yeah.
Probably. Thank you so much, Nandipha, for joining me on this podcast. I appreciate you. I've enjoyed this. I've got goosebumps all over. I think I've been shifting on the seat so many times because your experiences are out of this world. And again, you challenged me again to really look within myself, and again, you win, we're challenged, thanks.
It's not about who's winning or who's not, unfortunately.
And thank you all so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.